Before we flip that key, give you the result of the first start, let's talk about why we are where we are, what we've done. I'm Bob with Purist Motorsports, and this is 1989 Saleen number 50. It's a car out of California. It is a client of ours, and it's been sitting for about 10 years. Stay tuned later in the video for a card that will come up, a couple actually, of previous videos we've done on this car, and you can check those out. But I want to talk about what we've done to get to the first start. So there are a lot of challenges in my mind on a car that's been sitting for 10 years. So the inside of the motor, for instance, cylinder walls and then piston rings, I want to make sure that they're not married to each other. Fuel system, I want to make sure it's all up to snuff and those kind of things. So when we got the car, I went through and did some, general cleaning, inspection, and that kind of stuff. But I went through this. We drained the oil in the motor, so specifically talking about the drive line and the fuel system. Drained the oil in the motor. We put in fresh oil. Luckily, a friend of mine has a specific tool that he had designed from an old distributor, so we could spin up the oil pump without having to turn the motor over. So in my mind, with a car that's been sitting for a while, that's one of the key things, is getting the blood, as you call it, back through the motor. So went through, we did that. We have just a drill with a bit. It actually has a little 1/4-inch bit in it, and just spun it up to get oil through the motor. Then, well, prior to that, we'd also gone through each cylinder and put in some of the stuff. You can see that in another video. As mentioned, you can watch for a couple of cards. So we'd put some Marble Mystery Oil inside the motor and make sure the cylinders were all in good shape. As I adjust, this is irritating me, so hold on a second. There, that's better. But the car itself was in great shape. The motor turned out to be really good when we turned it. We actually put a wrench on it, turned that. Then it was on to the fuel system. So once we got the motor in, got fresh oil in it, put the spark plugs back in it, the motor was pretty much ready to go because we had pumped oil through it, cleaned any kind of debris off of it, put a new belt on it because it had an original, well, from probably 10 or 15 years ago, 12 years ago, a gator back belt, which was kind of cool, but it's not really one you could use because it's so old. But the car itself ended up being in great shape under the hood once we got all those things done. The fuel system was another thing. The inside of the gas tank was going to be a big concern of mine after sitting for so long. So we went through, we siphoned out all the gas. There was about somewhere between 8 and 9 gallons in it. So 2/3, 3/4 of a tank. Drained all of that, well, got as much of it out as we could before dropping the gas tank. Then dropped the gas tank, pulled it out, ended up looking inside of it, and I'm gonna tell you what, that thing was dreamy. I couldn't have asked for a better gas tank that's been sitting. And I think a lot of it was because there was so much fuel in it. I've heard and watched online, well, you just watch Chasing Classic Cars is a good example. Wayne talks about when they find these cars and it has a full tank of gas, the inside of the gas tank has a better chance of surviving because the gas actually protects the inside of the tank. Having seen what it did for this car, I'm a believer in that now. So we did that. While we had the tank out, we went ahead and just swapped the pump out and put a new fuel pump in it. While we're at it, we might as well do that. It's also, we upgraded to a 255. I think there was a 110 that was in it. That's something that may have been changed out before. So we changed the fuel pump out. Something that we found that was interesting. In our conversations with the owner, they said that on a hard left turn, just a speedy turn and a hard left, they could smell gas inside the car. And when we got the gas tank, when we first started dropping it, we noticed that the evap line that comes off of the little vent line that comes off of the top of the tank was actually smashed completely. Also, when we opened the gas cap for the first time, it spewed. Now I'm going to assume that it was pressurized. I don't know for sure, but it did make a hissing sound, whether it sucked air in or pushed air out. I wasn't prepared at that moment to figure that out, but it did make a hissing sound, which led me to believe that the tank was pressurized or had vacuum on it in some way. But that evap line would cause issues like that to where the gas tank couldn't vent and it would come out of the gas cap. So it all made sense. Once talking to the owner, we figured out that that vent line was likely causing that issue. So replaced that vent line with another hose and routed it properly around the side of the tank once we got up. And then once we got everything set, hooked back together, we got a trusty fire extinguisher, which highly recommend, and for this reason. So I get in the car, I sit down, put the key in it, and I wanted to cycle the fuel pump a couple of times to check for leaks. So I cycled it once, which I don't know that I got the first cycle on video. So got out, checked under the hood, make sure there's no gas smell or anything like that. Everything looked good. Got back in it, cycled it again. When I went to fire it, turned the key, pushed the clutch, turned the key, this happened. So what you just saw can happen to anyone. The output or outline, whatever you call it, of the fuel filter, because we did replace a fuel filter, the output going to the motor, that line popped off. For whatever reason, the clip did not hold, or I don't know what it is. I typically go through and double and triple check things. This is a good reason why you should always quadruple, tenfold check things, because that was all fuel that just went underneath the car. And so once we went through, we couldn't find the clip. For whatever reason, I guess it had broken in pieces, or who knows, it may have been, I may not have put it back in, but through all of the madness of trying to get it all put back together. But I got went and bought a clip, and it wasn't the right clip. Ended up getting the old clip out of the trash that I'd thrown away for the high pressure line on the other side on the gas tank. Put it all back together. So, big proponent of safety, always have a fire extinguisher. If you are driving one of these old Foxes like this one or whatever at a show, please be sure to have a fire extinguisher handy, because as old as they are now, especially if they've never been apart, though there's some low mileage cars out there, I would definitely recommend having fire suppression of some kind around if you're cruising around in it. But got it back together, turned the key, well, I actually cleaned up the mess, let the shop actually vent out, open the doors, that kind of thing. And then got back in it, tested it again. And then once we turned the key with fuel pressure, this is what happened. So as you can see, it had a bunch of junk fly out of the mufflers, which I figured would happen because there was a lot of acorns and that kind of stuff from little furry friends under the hood, but luckily they didn't get into any of the wiring. Now you'll notice it was really idling funny. It wouldn't hold an idle on its own. I think it's likely that the idle air control valve needs to be replaced. It's probably stuck. I do know when I ran it up to about 1800 and it would fluctuate. It would just rev up and down, up and down. So I think that valve needs to be replaced. Once that's replaced, it should hold an idle. So that will be next. We've got to get a valve. I didn't have one. I have an extra one laying around that's worth putting on the car. Ones I do have are on other cars. So we'll get that replaced and we'll see if that solves that issue. But it started up. I was able to get my foot on it and hold it to where it would run, but it wouldn't run on its own. Not surprising, but the big thing is that it ran, and it ran well. Like, it really revved pretty good when I was touching it, and it's a healthy motor. So what's next? Well, we'll get to and change that valve, and then I think we got to start disassembly and get ready for paint. We've already removed the moldings here, and we'll do a little detail on that, but in another video. But right now, that's where we are. The car actually runs. I don't think it has a vacuum leak. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a vacuum leak. I've looked all around. I actually replaced one of the hoses across the back of the firewall, which is typical. They get brittle and they fail, so I need to double check that because it could be a vacuum leak. I'm sure other people are thinking that right now. But as it sits, it actually runs. I could probably put it on the ground, get it off of these little dollies, and at least drive it through the parking lot. Don't know that I would go down the road because I haven't gone through the brake system yet. So that's going to be something we have to go through before we go to paint, because it needs to be able to move around on its own in the shop without any kind of incident. But that's where we are. If you haven't, please subscribe. Don't forget to like, tag, and share on other social media platforms. And as always, whether you're driving them or restoring them, always enjoy them. Peace.